Before we start this video, a large thank you to Adam and Matthias for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And as always, an immense thank you to Halo Burner for their massive and continued support of the channel this month on Patreon. I hope you enjoy the video. Hello everybody, a quick note before we start. So as the tutorial suggests, this is a dialogue system reminiscing something of Elden Ring or Dark Souls. So if you click this video and you haven't watched the series and you think this is going to be an intricate dialogue system like something from Baldur's Gate, you should definitely look elsewhere because this is not meant to scale with something so extensive. If you are here normally because of the tutorial and you want to see something similar to Elden Ring or Dark Souls, then continue. Hello everybody, the first thing we're going to do is create an NPC. I'm just going to duplicate my knight. I'll make it so he's in the same team as me for now. Now, normally you probably want to make the AI neutral so you can hit them but they won't target you. But I'm not going to get into that in this video. That's for another video, and it's pretty easy to do if you want to just basically add another team and change how enemies attack and target each other. But if you want to see a video on extensive attacking and targeting, like neutral AI, friendly AI, let me know. I can circle back and we can add on to our system right now. It's just basically team 1 and 2. But I'm just going to drag this guy into the scene, and I'm going to set him to the friendly team for now, and I'm going to create an empty game object under him. So since our interactable dialogue works on our interactable system, or at least it's going to, and our interactable objects, I believe they're network objects, unless I'm misremembering that. That's only in my project. We're going to need to instantiate these under the character if they have dialogue, which is fine because not all characters will have dialogue anyway. So what I'm trying to say is not all characters will get these. Now what we're going to do is add a dialogue interactable script, and we obviously don't have this yet, so this is new. And we're going to need a rigid body and a collider as well. The rigid body bit is important, otherwise the character will just treat this basically as part of its collider and you won't be able to use it as interactable. Set the layer to interactable and then create on this game object a sphere collider or whatever collider you want. And what I do is obviously you have to make it a trigger, but I like putting it a little bit in front of the character and higher. So if I go 1 on the Y and 1 on the Z, you can see here like that's a pretty perfect spot to have to stand and talk to this character. Next, I'm going to add the rigid body, as I just said, and I am going to go ahead and make it kinematic, and I'm going to freeze position and rotation. And basically, this is not going to act as a rigid body in the sense that it will allow this to move, but it just needs to act as its own independent collider. So if I double click now on the dialogue interactable, we're going to open that up and start. So the goal of this video is to basically show you pretty much everything that we're going to use in the system, and then at the end, we're going to leave it open for you to go and continue if you want, but if not, we're going to conclude it hopefully in the next video. This system is like fairly large, but it's pretty simple. There's just a couple of moving parts. So make the dialogue interactable, inherit from our interactable object, and then with that comes our interacting ability. So our interaction system is going to handle actually being able to prompt this, and we're going to override the awake method because we're going to need an AI character variable on this script, and the AI character is basically going to be the owner of this dialogue. So since we're going to instantiate the dialogue as a child game object, we can always get this by saying AI character is equal to get component in parent AI character manager. Next, we're going to also override the interact, and we're going to do the on trigger enter and on trigger exit in a moment as well. So we can delete the base interact. We're not going to do any of the base logic for this, and what we're going to do is basically say if the player UI manager.instance.menu window is open, simply return. You don't want to be able to do anything if you have a menu window open. We're also going to say if the AI character is dead and somehow you're in the middle of an interaction prompt, we're going to basically set the interactable collider to false, and we're going to return. Now this should probably not happen unless some really weird thing happens like lightning strikes just as you're interacting with them, but just in case. And then we're going to say if, we're going to check here for the server, and in Elden Ring I do believe you can only talk to NPCs if you are the host. So this might not even be required because we can make a check for that, but in case you want to, we're just going to make it so if this is the server, we're going to save the game. When you talk to somebody, it's always a good time to save because if you hit a certain dialogue option that does something important, you want to save so you can't go back on it or save's coming. So we'll say if network manager.singleton is server, we'll go world save game manager.instance.save. And this is optional. Obviously, you don't have to save here if you don't want to. Okay, so I'm going to put some pseudocode here for closing all pop-up windows. I don't think we have a function for that yet. I have one in Nephilim that's just like item pop-ups and such. So we'll probably circle back to that. And then I'm going to come in here and make a line of pseudocode. We want to play the current dialogue event. And an optional thing here, we can also use any kind of IK now to make the character's head track the conversation target. So if you want to make the AI look at your character basically when you initiate dialogue, this will be a good place to do that. Okay, I think that pretty much covers everything here on the interact. Let's go to the on trigger enter, and then we'll do the on trigger exit. So on trigger enter, the first thing we want to do right here now is we want to basically check again if the character is dead. When you enter this collider, if the character is dead, you want to disable the collider and basically cancel any dialogue if there is any happening. So we can say interactable collider.enabled is equal to false. And then right below that, we can just make some pseudocode here for now. And I'm just going to say, if there is an active dialogue with this character and the player, end it. All right. Now let's do on trigger exit. So again, override on trigger exit. And now on trigger exit is going to cancel the dialogue, and the difference between canceling and ending it is canceling it is when it ends early through some means. Like if you leave the collision radius of this trigger, it should cancel the dialogue. Ending it is just when you're done cycling through the actual dialogue and all of its dialogue pieces. So on trigger exit, we're going to say player is equal to other.getComponent player manager. If the player is null, simply return. If the player is not the owner, simply return. And now we can make some pseudocode here for canceling the dialogue. So I'm just going to say cancel current dialogue. And we put in brackets if any with this character. All right, so like I said before, canceling a dialogue is not the same as ending it. Canceling would imply that you left the trigger collision radius early. So pseudocode, cancel current dialogue if any with this character when the player leaves the interaction radius. And a second bit of pseudocode, close all menus related to this character. So if you open, for example, a blacksmith menu from the blacksmith, or a shop menu from a shopkeeper, etc., we can handle that here as well. Now, what I did personally was put all my shop menus in one simple function on my player UI, and every time a dialogue is ended with an NPC, I just scan for any of those open menus and close them all anyway. And then lastly, you can reset the head IK tracking if it is enabled. So if you leave the radius of a character and they're tracking you, you can stop that here as well. Okay, so I am next going to go back into the project and we're going to open up the AI character sound effect manager. Now let's add a header here for dialogue. I'm going to put it right above blocking. And actually I want to put that below blocking. I don't know why. But this is where we're going to keep our variables that have to do with dialogue on our character, and not every character is going to have dialogue. So we're going to make a pseudocode thing here for the character dialogue ID. This is going to be used to load a certain set of dialogues based on the character's ID. So since not all characters will have dialogue, you can have the no ID flag as well, which most enemies or characters will have in the game. Only a handful, if you're probably doing something like a Souls or Elden Ring type deal, will have some dialogue. So next, right below that, we're going to do a public game object interactable dialogue. And this is going to be the collider, the interactable collider itself. And then right below that, again, I'll do some pseudocode. We're going to say current character dialogue action or event, I guess. So this is going to be stored on a scriptable. So we're going to say dialogues will be scriptable objects. And this is the current one that the AI character is attempting to process. And then optionally, you can have a farewell dialogue, and you can just give every character a set of these. And if you wanted to too, like I do at Nephilim, you can change them based on the circumstances of the game. So we're going to use the thing I call stage ID, which I got from Skyrim modding before, but basically, each character will have a certain stage ID, and depending on their stage ID, you change their actual dialogue and optionally their farewell dialogue. So if something sad happens to the character in a quest, you can have them go from a happy farewell dialogue to a sad farewell dialogue. But these will be interchangeable. You could do the same thing with a greeting dialogue, but I usually put a greeting dialogue on my core dialogue because the greeting for each core conversation could change. And this is just obviously preference. You don't have to do that, but it's why I do it. So public bool dialogue is playing is equal to false. This is just going to show whether we are currently having a conversation with somebody. And then we're going to say optional conversation target to look at. You can store that here if you want. What I do is I use a coroutine and just get the head tracking with this here, and I'll just run the coroutine. And then when there's no longer a target or the conversation is ended, I stop it. So let's make some functions here now, or at least the skeletons of them. First, I'm just going to make a comment here for dialogue to show all these are dialogue related. Then I'm going to make the first function public void play current dialogue event. And then right below that, immediately after, let's make another one. Public void play farewell dialogue event. And optionally too, you can put the farewells on the core dialogue event if you want as well. If you're going to have really specific farewells for each individual dialogue branch, but I like using a general farewell, so I just put it here. I feel like Dark Souls and maybe Elden Ring does that too, but I can't know for sure. Public void cancel current dialogue event. So this can be called when dialogue is canceled. And then we can do some other events here too. So we can say on current dialogue event ended. And if you wanted to, you could do on canceled, but I'm just going to use on ended. So we're going to have this on the dialogue itself as well, the dialogue scriptable. But if you want further control, you can optionally use this on here as well. So basically when the dialogue is over, it'll call something on the dialogue scriptable itself, and then it will call this on the character optionally. And again, this is just extra. You might not even need this, but sometimes you have really weird circumstances where you need these weird calls when things are over. So I have them here. I use this like once or twice in my project. So I'm going to put some comments here. Use for specific calls when dialogue is over, cancels current dialogue event when leaving, and then generic farewell dialogue. That can be changed. So again, this is just a system I threw together. I'm going to be honest, this doesn't have as much, I'll say, mileage as my other systems. So I'm sure you can expand upon this and optimize it a bit. But this is as it is pretty much verbatim from Nephilim. I'm making a couple minor modifications because there's some extra stuff here that this project just doesn't need. So now back over on the dialogue interactable, I'm going to say AI character sound effect manager, which doesn't exist. So we're going to go to the AI character manager script and get that variable on awake. So let's make an AI character sound effects manager variable. It's going to copy one that I have here, or rather do it the same way. Hide inspector public AI character sound effects manager. I'm going to call that AI character sound effects manager. And now on awake, we can just call that by using get component, as it will always rest in the same game object as the manager. AI character sound effects manager is equal to get component AI character sound effects manager. All right, cool. Now let's go back to the dialogue and we can call it now. So play the current dialogue is just going to be AI character sound effect manager play current dialogue event. So again, the dialogue events will be stored as scriptable objects. Now down here on trigger enter, if there is an active dialogue with this character and the player, simply end it. So player, we can get a player variable from other.getComponent player manager. If the player is not null and is the owner, we can go ahead and end this dialogue. We can say AI character sound effect manager, cancel current dialogue. It shouldn't be end, it should be cancel because death would imply that the dialogue was ended prematurely. Might want to change that comment. And then down here on trigger exit, AI character sound effect manager cancel current dialogue event. And we can save. Okay. Now let's go back into the project. And I'm going to create a new script now. And this is going to be our scriptable object for our dialogue. So you could just call this dialogue if you want. But to be a bit more descriptive, I will call it character dialogue. I guess that's just equally generic, but for some reason I like that more. So I'm going to double click this, open it up, and we're going to do, as is per tradition, delete the update and start functionality and drop in our namespace. And I'm going to make this derive from a scriptable object. And I'm just going to start mapping out all the variables and functions here. And again, this system has not had a lot of mileage in it, so I'm sure you can find ways to make it a little better or expand upon it. But this is what I have currently, and a few people asked me now to share this. A lot of people actually wanted to see this, so I figured I'd make a couple episodes on it. If you can think of some more interesting or better ways to formulate this, please share it in the comments. Always looking to improve this stuff. So, header, greeting, dialogue. And again, if you wanted to, you put a farewell dialogue here as well, but I keep my farewells very generic. So this is going to be basically a specific greeting for each core dialogue chain. So think of a dialogue chain as, well, we have to say using system collections, using system generic, but think of a dialogue chain as just a set of sentences. So if my dialogue chain was, hi, how are you doing? And then I said some other random specific stuff, that would be the one chain. And then if you entered another chain and came back, I would start a different conversation or take the conversation in a different way. So basically, they're just going to think of these blocks as potentials to do things or set a stage. So if you talk to an AI a handful of times, maybe you set the stage to an ID of 2, and now 2 has a new set of dialogues, and then you talk to him again on 2, and maybe now you have some certain requirements like an item, or you just need to talk to him again, and now the dialogue goes to 3, and then at 3 he gets even new dialogue. You can optionally have a new greeting in all these dialogue blocks, or you can just use some generic dialogue. But this is basically how it's going to work. It's going to be pretty straightforward. You'll talk to a character. Optionally, you can set a stage, and depending on that stage ID, you get new dialogue. If the stage ID does not change, you'll get the same dialogue. So we can have here header for core dialogue, and it's going to be the same as greeting dialogue. So what we here is we have a list of strings and audio clips, and we have the greeting is played check because we only do that once. And then for core dialogue, we have a list of strings and audio clips, and then we have the index ID. Now, why do we have a list of both? Well, you're going to have a list of both because you're going to have subtitles for each audio clip. And this means that these lists will need to be the same length because for every audio clip, you will need a subtitle. And then under here, the dialogue index is going to keep track of what part you're at in this list. So, optional settings. You could have the AI face the character or play an animation if you wanted to when you start. You could have, I'm just going to think of a few off the top of my head. You could kill the character on cancel. I do that one time in one of my quests with a dying character. If you end the conversation, he just dies. You could open a menu on cancel or end, etc. So you can pretty much do anything from here that you want. It just depends on what your needs are. So then we're going to go to, we're going to make a header, for end triggers. And again, this will just be things that happen when you end the dialogue. And I'll make a serializable bool, not cancel. Cancel would imply that you canceled the conversation early. Ending implies that you got to the end of the dialogue chain. So you could say set stage index, and this just means do you want to set this character's stage to a new ID. So if I talk to him and he's at stage 0, and then I get to the end of the conversation, do I want to set it to 1 and this will change his dialogue, or do I want to keep it the same? So we're going to say set stage index, and defaultly this is probably going to be false. Because for things like shopkeepers, you're not going to want to do that most of the time. And I think most dialogues that you make in the game will probably be for stuff like that, like blacksmiths. But I don't know what you're making. I'm just going off of an assumption here. Maybe you want to set new stages all the time, but this is just going to basically affect if the next dialogue will be new or not. If you're going to get the same cycles or a different cycle. And the reason why we have a list and audio clip of greetings, by the way, is because you can randomly pick one. There can be like 5 different greetings for each dialogue block. So we're going to say set stage index by default is false, and then we're going to pass an int in case you do for the new stage ID. Okay, now let's make some skeletons of functions. We're going to have one for play dialogue event. And we're going to pass the AI character. And then right below that, under play dialogue event, we're going to make a public IEnumerator play dialogue coroutine. And I'll get to why I use a coroutine in the future. I'll make that private for now until I need to make that public. We're going to make this pass an AI character manager, an AI character. And then we're just going to say yield return null right now so it stops throwing us an error. So yield return null. Okay, right below that again, I'm just going to simply say public void on dialogue ended. And this is going to be called again when the dialogue reaches its end. We can make this require an AI character because you can also call the AI characters on dialogue in it if you want to do something character specific. Maybe you have 2 people who share the same dialogue, but you want one character to do something the other character does not. I'm just trying to think of a bunch of use cases here. And then we have on dialogue canceled, which again will be called when you cancel the dialogue. And that's pretty much it for this dialogue function, or rather this dialogue scriptable. This is pretty much all that you need to get started. Now the last thing we're going to do is go to our enum script, where we store all of our enums, and we're going to make an enum for the character dialogue ID. So before I do that, I'll make a comment. This is used to give characters proper dialogue. So basically, if a character has an actual dialogue ID, they're going to load some dialogue based on that ID. So public enum character dialogue ID, and the first one is going to be no dialogue ID, because most characters in your game are probably not going to have any dialogue. This is used for all the enemies, anybody that you can't interact and talk with, basically. So I think the vast majority of your characters, if you're making a Souls-like or a Dark Souls game, will have no dialogue ID. And I'm just going to make one for the Nameless Knight that I've made as a prefab in the start. And I'll say Nameless Knight dialogue ID. And right there is a great place to call it because we're approaching a pretty good time limit for this video. So you have all the things in front of you now to start on this if you want to make an attempt yourself and create this system. I highly encourage you to give it a whack because doing stuff outside the confines of a video is the greatest way to learn. And it is the best way to gain confidence doing your abilities. I hope that by this episode, a lot of you guys are attempting that. I'm sure a lot of you are. But regardless, I will be adding on and hopefully concluding this system in the next episode. Thank you very much for joining me here again. I hope you all have a very lovely weekend. A special thank you to my patrons, the people who like and comment and share the series. It is because of all of you the series can exist at all, so you have my sincerest gratitude. I'll see you guys next week.